BI or Die, the podcast by Reporting Impulse about analytics, dashboards, and business intelligence.
Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to another episode of our podcast, BI or Die. I'm Kai, and together with Viktoria, my fantastic co-host, we have another really great guest today. Even though it's not about this English-speaking content we are providing, there's a little thing I like to put the spot on, and that's the BI or Die SAP Month. It's broken down in German. We have 1 month fully focusing on SAP Analytics Cloud. We are very happy that we are co-working that together with the SAP. So we will start in October. So the topics are planning, analytics, dashboarding, self-service, and a lot of best practice included in that. Every Friday, 1:30 p.m., we will focus on those topics. There will be a lot of discussions. You are happy to join if you like, and that's what I like to at least make a little hint here from the beginning. But as we are here in our English-speaking content, I like to focus on our guest and also on my great co-host Viktoria. Warm welcome to you, Viktoria, as well. Have you heard about the SAP BI or Die month already? Will you join us for discussion as well?
Of course, me or some of my great colleagues, I'm sure they can add some good things. That's what I thought when you were talking. I said I have to talk to you afterwards again about all your cool discussions and days
Perfect.
coming.
Perfect. Yeah, but I think we have a great guest from Seattle, United States. It's Nick Kelly. Great that you're here. Thank you for taking the time, being with us. Yeah, very warm welcome, Nick.
Delighted to be here. And I know this is your English-speaking content. Hopefully you can understand my Irish accent.
I love Irish accents, but I didn't hear that Irish, and so I was surprised how good I understand your American accent. I expected.
I understand. Years ago, I had an internship in Honolulu, and it was like very exciting. Someone from Ireland going to Honolulu for their internship. My boss was French. After 2 weeks of working there, he said, "Nick, I can understand around 30% of what you're saying." I was like, okay, we had to fix that. So I worked on the accent, so it's not as strong.
That's nice, especially for us and also for our listeners. But maybe, you can expand your introduction a bit, just a brief introduction of you, and then I tell a little story about how I found you. And but maybe first a few words about yourselves.
Awesome, Kai. So my background is in computer science, and I pretty quickly got into user interface design, and it was a byproduct of, hey, we're building software and most of it doesn't look very good. So I kind of ended up like, by proxy, someone's got to make it look good. So I started figuring out what's good design. And again, by proxy, we were noticing, hey, the experience isn't great. You can have a nice looking interface, but the experience isn't great. So I started to kind of pick up user experience techniques, and I got really into that. And I ended up getting a job in Singapore some years ago as a director of UI UX for a mobile company, and got really into that. And I eventually started getting into a little bit of analytics, and I was very fortunate to end up working with Deloitte Analytics, getting a job there in Singapore, and really cutting my teeth on what is analytics, because I really didn't know what it was before that. My job was to focus on data visualization, and to my own embarrassment, I didn't really know what that meant either before I took the role. And the organization was looking for someone who had a background in user experience, but could also understand databases and how to do good design, as a way of kind of triangulating in on what would make a good person for data visualization. So remember, this is back in the days when you couldn't go get a degree in data viz, and there were barely any qualifications coming out for analytics. So you kind of had to piece things together a little bit. And so I ended up working with that firm in Singapore, and then eventually moved over to the US. And then did lots of travel, lots of workshops, and engaged with from fairly senior folks at some of the larger organizations in the world, and ended up then getting a role with a smaller organization for visual analytics called Logic 2020, and just kept focusing on, how do we make people really adopt and use the insights that's available with their data. And my focus was a little bit more narrow like that on dashboards. Dashboards being the primary user interface that people will interact with data. So I sort of made that my specialty. Like, I just really dive into that. And what I ended up finding was the problems weren't all isolated to data quality and, some of the typical issues you'd find with data. What I started to notice was elements of change management were needed, and certainly elements of user experience. Not all of them. You don't need to be an expert in any of those, but you need pieces of it, and you need awareness of it. And that's what my experience of the last 20 years has really taught me about analytics is, where I need to focus and where I can provide value. And I recently then just went independent, out by myself, really focusing on training and supporting people and how they can do all of this. So I hope that gives you a flavor, and I wasn't too overly verbose, and everyone was able to understand my accent.
Definitely. I mean, above all, I think you're very active on LinkedIn and also other social media. So in case anyone is interested in many of your great contacts, just contact him over LinkedIn. I think that's a quite good source. But maybe, however, although you were that active on LinkedIn, my first attention was through traditional email marketing, actually. I mean, I feel like getting, 100s of email through the TDWI organization. But there was one seminar note that caught my eye. I think it was the Practical Guide to Data Visualization and Enterprise Dashboard Design. That was more or less the start. So I started doing a little research. And then I found out, well, this guy is not only writing that he's a hands-on leader in analytics, 15-year or 20-year plus experience in international analytics, dashboard design, adoption, user experience, and all what you mentioned here. I thought, well, he's actually delivering that, at least when I looked at your LinkedIn profile and so on. So I was really eager really to talk to you about that in our podcast. And maybe one thing I would like to ask you concerning TDWI, for me as Reporting Impulse, at least the European part of the TDWI, we are associated with our first book, our first talks, the launch of our more or less our BI network. But what does TDWI mean to you? Why are you actually holding those seminars for them or in cooperation with them?
Oh, for sure. So when I first moved over to the US, I had a great advocate of mine and a mentor and someone I would look up to, Donald Farmer. He's a big name in BI, and he was speaking at TDWI, and he suggested that maybe I have a look. And I'd been doing a lot of hands-on workshops with clients when I was over in Singapore, and so usually those workshops, you end up designing something. You end up designing a dashboard, or like, what do you need to see to move the needle for your business? Always a portion of that is educating executives on what's possible, what's not possible with data. Otherwise, you end up with like reports and dashboards that like, hey, why doesn't it have this and that and that? And you always get into this struggle, right? So there was always an element of education. So when I came over to the US, I got introduced to TDWI, and we hit it off, had a great conversation. What I love about TDWI is that they have a high standard. You can only continue speaking there if you get good feedback from the attendees, and so you have to maintain that. So you have to have high quality content. So I view TDWI as a means for me to get feedback from what people currently need. What are the challenges and trends in BI and analytics? What are they facing? What do they need help with? And how can I provide content that's going to help them and support them? So for me, TDWI is that it's a mirror. It's an ability to understand what people are going through, but also then it keeps me sharp. And it's one thing to talk about this stuff. It's entirely different to do it, and that's why that course, the Practical Guide, I am all about being practical. Like, if you can't do it in your own organization, in your own job, it's great. Like, some theory is fantastic, But if you can't map it over, then, why are we doing it? And people don't have time anymore. So my work with TDWI is very focused on what people can do in short amounts of time, not have to get like overburdened with theory, but like tell me in 10 minutes one thing I can do to increase adoption of dashboards. It's that kind of stuff. And that's what I love about TDWI. I will say I do miss the in-person events. It is all virtual these days, but yeah, it's really a great organization, and it's an honor and pleasure to have the opportunity to speak at their events.
Definitely. Also, the TDWI here in Germany, or in the European area, it's also first touch point was definitely for us these personal events. It's kind of, I don't know, if it's a family, the BI family, whatever. It's really kind of a class meeting coming to Munich. That was quite usual for us once a year being there. Watching great speakers and stuff like that. But yeah, the virtual thing is also a good thing, and that's why we're having the chance really to talk to you. And that's, I think, the greatest thing, having these international speakers here. And and then we will definitely like to continue. We have these little quick questions, A or B. Family is a good word. Okay, so let's get more personal, not more personal, but try to continue our pre-discussion a bit. A few little and fast decision questions, and then we dive into the
questions. Just 5 of them. I'm sure it's easy. Most of them are easy for you. So, plane or car?
Car.
Suit or jogging suit?
Suit.
Beer or wine?
Beer.
Business journal or novel?
Business journal. That was a tough one.
Data visualization or data science?
I would have to say data visualization. It's a given. Yeah.
Perfect. Really interesting. Was it hard or was it okay?
That was hard. I like the suit versus kind of training clothes. Like I get up in the morning and I put on like just relaxed clothes. But invariably got calls. You need to look sharp, so I'll end up putting on a suit. So it's a tough call. One's more comfortable than the other, for sure.
Especially in Corona times, I think it's really changing. Like having the business trade address here and then the jogging suit. So both.
It's so true. It's so true. For me, I think just being at home, it's important to change your attire and to go through a ritual of getting yourself ready to do business, or getting yourself ready to shift into a work mode, especially when you got kids around the house. I think it's even more important to have some level of ritual around the attire.
But I really liked that there was a YouTube video of a German news speaker, and you saw him like doing the news, and then it was made up. But then he stand up, and you saw his trousers there, his underpants, and that was really funny, because he's like normally a really serious guy, and I really like this. But this was like a Corona joke, I think, for everyone.
Yeah, it destroys the image for sure when you see someone, the camera goes lower and they're wearing shorts.
So, but let's start with the first question. You already mentioned it in the preparation of our podcast. I went through your CV and your previous position, and I was like in LinkedIn scrolling down, like 3 times, 4 times, and there were great cities, great countries like Philippines, Seattle, Singapore, Washington, Ireland. I don't know. I think I missed. You said Vienna as well. So, what did you take away from that frequent change of job and locations? And would you do it again? And what you're at the moment is the right thing for you at the moment?
Yeah, I think the way you ended there, Viktoria, is it's the right thing at the moment. And for me, it was where we are in our stage of life. When we were single, without kids, Philippines, fantastic. Singapore, fantastic. Once we started having kids, our priorities started to change. And we found maybe less alignment with what our personal family goals were with those countries. Nothing wrong with those countries, fabulous countries. But we wanted to do more travel. And we wanted to do that travel without having to get in an airplane because we've done a lot of flying. And so we figured the US is going to be a really great place to explore and be able to get in a car and drive for 3 days if you wanted to, and experience vastly different environments and landscapes. So I think it is very much, it's what works for you in those countries. That's our experience. And the second thing, more professionally speaking, is the problems with data are the same in all locations. Now there are of course cultural differences, but I'm hard pushed to put my finger on one major cultural difference that really moves the needle for BI and analytics. So I would say they are fairly consistent across the board where I have lived and worked, and those challenges. So they're the main things I take away.
But would you say like for example, numbers and data have the same value in the countries, or would you say they're more like data-driven countries and more like people just deciding from the belly, or?
Yeah, that's a great point actually. I would think Singapore was the most advanced in terms of having a culture of making decisions with data as a country, as a nation. Then, of course, below that or could supersede it is the organizational culture. So, whichever organization I was working with at the time or was a client, that would then supersede potentially any cultural imperative that's there. But as a country, certainly Singapore was the one, like they had the Smart Cities initiative years ago, 10 years ago. They were really getting on top of all of that. And I would still say to this day, they're probably a leader in using data to govern and make decisions, which is marvelous and tremendous to see. And at an organizational level, then you could see that born through some things. So, like the Singapore government would fund certain initiatives for different organizations where they would subsidize. If you're doing something with data, they would subsidize it, which is absolutely a phenomenal thing to do as a country. So I'd say probably, by far and away, it was Singapore that is the one that is most advanced with on a national level.
And does it change the private life of people there? Is it more like in the business, or is it also like touching you really in private?
I can't say I got exposure enough to how that would impact people's private lives, but it was certainly across the board in the enterprise. You would see it everywhere. And I'm sure people brought that home. But that's, my wife and I are fairly private people. So we tend not to socialize a lot. We didn't go out for drinks and those kinds of things very much. So I can't comment on the personal use of data too much.
Really interesting. Thank you.
Okay, but more going down to the practical part, you described this as a hands-on leader. So maybe we are then more focusing now on the project stuff and the BI world, more or less. And I found also a little post from your side on LinkedIn, which extremely well, from my point of view, described that. And also with a certain self-irony, that's what I really liked about it. I think it started something like, it took me around 20 years. Smart people might have figured out it faster. But well, I mean, you're able to formulate it and your key learnings for a successful BI project. So, I mean, that's a good thing overall. And one thing right away, you covered that already at the beginning. It's not only about technical expertise. There's a lot you mentioned, like organizational and on a human level, of course. But maybe just for our listeners, could you sum that up? What are your key learnings? What makes successful BI projects work?
Yeah, I think let me deal with the first part there, Kai, which was it took me 20 years to figure it out, and it really did. And there are people out there, depending on their background, would figure it out way faster than I would. So if someone had a background in change management, they'd go look at the problems that people have in BI and analytics and working with data, and they go, oh yeah, that's a people problem. You need to do this, and that. And done. They'll drive adoption. The tools that I had, and I would say didn't support me in being able to spot or identify what the problems were. And I think it's a problem a lot of people have in the analytics and BI space, is we're very technically competent and we know how to work with certain tools and we know how to work with data, but we don't necessarily know how to work with people. And that's what took me so long to figure out. Was you could build the best dashboard in the world. It could have tremendous insight. The risk here is, though, if we deliver on the promise of data, which is to, let's say, drive behavioral change, let's say that is an aspect of it, or to inform better decision making. Well, if that decision making is going to have organizational impact, which naturally we want it to have, we also have to have a similar track that is going to deal with the impact of that change. And so for me, that's what took time to learn and understand. You have to bring people on a journey. We've heard this story, the data storytelling piece, and it always come across it. It's very important. Data storytelling is important. But the more important story to tell is the story of people around data, not the story within the data. That's important. But if you can't bring people on that journey, then how are we going to get them to, use data to inform their decisions? And over the years then, maybe I would have started with 100%, let's focus on the data and making great dashboards. And, over the years, it starts to change. Hey, maybe 10% we need to focus on people. Still 90% on data. I'm nearly at the point now where it's like 10% is on data and dashboards, and the rest is just on people and bringing them on that journey. And it might continue that way. It might completely change. I might find one day to the next, I need to change my approach here. But I have found putting the focus on people and change management and user experience has yielded far greater results than worrying about should the filters be on the left or the right side of a dashboard. What exact size should the font be? Should we use pie charts or bar graphs? Like, those things are all important considerations, but look, if people aren't accessing and using it and adopting it and influencing their behavior and impacting the organization, it's kind of like a trivial conversation to be having if people just aren't interested or involved. So for me, those are my learnings, Kai. Like the importance of change management mixed with user experience, and the small bits that you can take away from those methodologies and apply them into BI is going to have a huge impact. In my experience, far more impact than something like data visualization best practices. Important, but if you want to impact, focus on people.
So
Definitely.
that's really, really interesting, because I think you made the evolution that a lot of people did in the last 10 years. I come from this more like change management part and project management part, and it was just coming by incident to BI, let's say, and was more like an outsider in the beginning. Like there
Right.
was a real like you had a department caring of people and do HR consulting, for example. And at my start at KPMG in the beginning, I was like just by incident in the BI sector, and just then they took me into project where the client was not satisfied with the solution, but they were just they didn't want to pay for the HR consulting, and they didn't want somebody outside there just talking with them stupid stuff. And I was just IT consultant, but I was doing just the emotional, the change management part, but with the in the corner of IT consulting. And now, it's like 3-4 years that really changed, that people accept and know that there's a lot of change management, project management inside of all these BI things. You still, and that's what I learned, you still need the technique and you need the knowledge like Kai has, like really knowing, and there's a lot of psychology within as well, saying filters left and right and forms like this, but you need this HR part more as well. Yeah. But
Absolutely.
Kai, you wanted to say something as well. I interrupted you a little bit.
No, that's fine. I mean, we're probably all heading in the same direction, saying, okay, it's not all about technologies, it's more about the human factor, and that many that projects rather fail due to missing steps in communication or organizational behaviors than really with regards to technologies. But maybe just from your practical experience, what are the few things, the few recommendations you would like to share with our listeners concerning your, let's say, best practices? How do you speeden up the process for companies, not doing this 20-year path like you did again? What are your best practices in transferring project experiences, best practices, whatever?
Absolutely, Kai. So look, I would ask the audience to think of any time they've had a significant change event in their life. Now, for me, I have issues with very minor changes. Like, for example, I was speaking at TDWI in Vancouver a few years ago, and I could see where there was a trash can. It was in a certain area of the room beside the door. After the lunch break, the trash can wasn't there anymore. That little change caused an irritation in me, so much so that I had to pause, take a break, and go find out what happened to the trash can. Now, that's incredibly trivial. But if you think of like any change events in your own life, and the cycle that you go through, and Viktoria, you obviously know about all of this, right? But you get denial, you get anger, you get all of these things you have to go through to allow that to happen. And sometimes you can avoid it, and sometimes you can't. Other times you can accelerate it. What I have learned is, if we're introducing change, and let's call a dashboard a change agent, we're going to introduce friction. We're going to have to deal with the friction. It's going to happen. We can deal with it at the end of the project, and that's going to surface in terms of no one using your dashboard, or people getting angry and upset and not liking you. The other option is to involve them really early on. And that's the first tip I would give here, is to say, if you are doing a new dashboard, or someone's thrown over a request over the wall and says, okay, we need this dashboard or report built, it needs to be treated like a partnership. And I think if you go into it with that mindset, okay, we're going to go on a journey together. I cannot do this by myself. I cannot come up with the requirements based off, some flimsy details in an email. It's going to require partnership. So tip number one, partner. Tip number two after that is you need to focus on the personas, which is a little bit more of a user experience piece, but you need to properly understand the goals and challenges for who you're designing for. I think it's one of the biggest mistakes that I see in BI is we're not truly understanding who we're designing for. Most projects that I see fail are designing for too many personas. And for just in case a few folks don't know what a persona is a group of people that you can group together by common goals and challenges. A good persona is, you were talking about, Viktoria, you're talking about HR. HR manager is a reasonably good persona. All HR managers in an organization probably have similar goals and characteristics, but they're different to a finance manager's goals and challenges. So they'd be two different personas. We have to identify who we're designing for. And if there are too many divergent goals, or goals that do not align within that persona, we're probably designing for too many people. We probably need to cut back a little bit and refine a little bit more. We might find that it's a HR managers within Germany are the ones in our organization that have the most similar characteristics. The ones in, let's say, France are too dissimilar, right? So we have to break it up. So that'd be another tip that I'd give. And finally, a third tip, have a product approach, a product launch approach to your dashboard. Treat it like you have to sell your dashboard, and treat the end users like the market. What benefits are you going to convey to them with the dashboard? And do they truly understand those benefits? Now, there's a whole other set of tips that would go along with taking a product approach. And there's a really good book, if people ever want to look it up, called The Product Launch Formula by Jeff Walker. It's a standardized process for how to launch products and get people engaged in them. And it does require you, when you are starting off with your dashboard, to truly understand what are the levers for value that your end users really care about. So I'd say, Kai, they're probably the main things I'd want to share with the audience here.
Perfect. I mean, I like those 3 tips pretty much. I mean, they're covering a lot. Not everything is easy to directly implement, but the idea is also what I see exactly in the projects, and these are the definitely success factors if you like to bring it to an end. This product perspective, really caring about the people right from the beginning. If you're not doing that, it's definitely no chance really to succeed. And also, I mean, going even more in this direction and this persona description, of course, there's the clear explanation of, okay, there's not this one fits all approach, or there's one dashboard covering everything. Some people are saying, okay, we have this Swiss Army knife approach or whatever. I think it's definitely not working. We need to think about rather more smaller dashboards, even dashboards we're using for a little time. And that's why the standards should be implemented, because you need to increase or reduce the time of implementing the dashboard. You have them available really quick. And for that, of course, you need kind of also process in designing those dashboards. And there was also one of those references of you in LinkedIn, and they focus on their enterprise dashboard process, and they somehow call it ridiculously effective. I think you also keep on talking about this Dashboard Wireframe Kit. There's also kind of cool video about that, also, or the rapid requirements for BI analytics. So probably they are all part of this process, or depending on the situation. But could you also describe more or less your proven process of how to make dashboards happen in a practical environment, and why it stands out more or less from your point of view?
Absolutely. So, if you're a analytics data professional and you hear, hey, you have to learn change management. Oh, you have to learn, the product approach. Oh, you have to learn user experience. Oh, you have to be good at design. Right? It's like, you're probably going to switch off. Like, come on. You could study each one of those for 4 years and still only know 1/10 of their subjects, right? So the idea of having a process is to have an anchor point for people to follow a path, to emulate some of the elements of those areas. They're not going to be expert in them, and they probably never will be. But there are pieces there that we can take. Like, if you're conducting a user interview, what are the 7 questions you have to ask? However, what if you only have 5 minutes? What are the 3 questions you need to be able to ask? What if you can't get any time with the stakeholder? What are you going to do then? So all of these things that that process would then handle, and really end to end. You don't have to do it all. If you look at that process, there's 21 steps in it. It's a lot of steps. If you want to knock it out of the park and you've got 3 months to build a dashboard, go for it. If you've got a week to build something, you're probably only going to do 2 or 3 of those steps. So it scales back and forth. Maybe you find like, hey, I can't interview anyone. Okay, well, maybe for the first iteration of the dashboard, maybe you'll just put out a wireframe of it and share that with them. And then iteration 2, you might say, hey, you remember last time around we shared a wireframe? I'd love to get your input on what a version 2 would look like. And gradually work on it that way. And like any change initiative, in the past, I've said to people when they ask me, how long does it take for you to build a dashboard? And I said, well, to effectively launch it, 3 months, 3 to 6 months. And usually that's kind of scoffed at. It's like, well, that's ridiculous. We build a dashboard in a week. I was like, well, yeah, but how's your adoption going? Okay, well, we don't measure adoption. Okay, well, that's a real problem. We need to be able to measure that. But if you talk to a change professional, and if you say to them, I can successfully manage change in 3 months and transition and shift an organization in 3 months, I mean, they're going to scoff as well, right? They say, no way. I mean, you need 1 year to 2 years for any major, transformation in an organization. So we try to find somewhere in the middle with that. So that's what the enterprise dashboard process does. But then I kind of got into the whole, board game creation to just challenge myself a little bit further. What can we do to gamify it further so that it's a little bit more fun? And because what I heard with the enterprise dashboard process is it's great and all, but if you're not confident or you're early in career, you might have a credibility issue. with senior stakeholders, engaging the C-suite or, senior leadership team. So what can you do to use let's say, the art of distraction effectively to take the attention off you? Don't worry about how junior I am, or maybe perceived how incapable I am, or I shouldn't be doing this. Put it on something else. Board game. Put it on that. It's in this, when you have something you can point at that's not you, you could say it's an established best practice. You can kind of take that attention and maybe the disbelief and the skepticism away to a degree. Okay, look, we're going to follow a best practice for doing this dashboard. Is everyone on board with doing best practice? I've been flippant here, but no one's really going to say, no, we don't want to do a best practice.
We want to discover on our own. That's definitely not okay.
We want to do worst practice. So when you can kind of point at something and say, look, there's a best practice. It's an industry standard. We can use this. We don't have to use all of it, but maybe we'll start with elements of it. That's where I started thinking of the board game. And, just giving people that distracting element, take the tension away from them, put it on something else. And the first one I did was the Dashboard Wireframe Kit, and I did that on Kickstarter. And, Kickstarter has this whole process. And, how do you successfully launch a product? And then that got me thinking, well, how do you launch a dashboard in an organization? And that's where I came across that approach from Jeff Walker. How do you launch a product? Well, why don't we do that in analytics and BI? If the dashboard's a product, and of course it is, then how do we launch it? How do we get people using it? And so the enterprise dashboard shows you how to do that for dashboards in the enterprise. And then the board games are like kind of a fun way to distract your stakeholders from what you're actually trying to do. You're trying to affect change and impact them, and improve your career and improve the outcomes for the organization. So they're all in support of doing that.
And this process you described, you bring that into the organization, you implement it together with them, do you practice it? Or is it more or less that you're the trainer explaining the whole process and afterwards they are doing it completely on their own? Or is it a combination of those two described elements?
It's a combination, Guy, all of the above. And so I have online courses that, if you just want to learn this stuff yourself in your own time, go for it. I do mentorship with that. So an organization might come to me and say, hey, we got 20 BI professionals that need to learn how to do this. They would then consume the theory, and then I would be available for mentorship over a period of time. Or, another one is I just go do the work, right? Like organizations just have me come in and do that. I will say that's shifted over the years, whereas now I'm more in an advisory role. So I won't do as much as just getting my hands dirty with that. Because I want people to scale it themselves. So if I'm doing that all the time, there's limited ability to learn, limited opportunity. So what I find works best is, people take the theory, they understand the training, and the process, they apply it themselves. Go apply it. It's not going to be an exact fit for any organization out of the box. They have to tweak it. They have to tailor it. They might find that, we already are really, really good at engaging the stakeholders. We don't need that. But we really suck at launching a dashboard. So, we can focus on that and de-emphasize other parts of the process. So it's really a mix, Kai. Like it depends, but I am more focused on the training and enablement these days.
Okay, and you described that as a particular fit to the enterprise environment. So, what is the enterprise environment from your point of view?
So it's, for me, where I find this most successful is any organization that has some sort of BI capability. Now that might be just one person. So we're talking organizations that have some focus on data and BI already, not small, tiny organizations. So I would say that target audience is usually the target organizations, kind of mid-size, is probably over 500 people, where they're at that level of scale and where they can also make that amount of impact. Not to say there isn't value to doing this in smaller organizations. It's just that people end up wearing more hats usually in the smaller organizations. And so I would say medium for sure, then to large scale organizations. If there's a COE or if there's like a community of practice around data and analytics, really works well there where you can apply scale to it.
So coming to our fourth question, you worked with a lot of tools, I'm sure, during your time, your 20 years experience. What would you say is the tool most fitting your way of working? So this adoption part, this usability. Is there a favorite one?
Yeah, this is going to be a really lame answer, Victoria. So and I'm sorry, I apologize for it because it's not fancy. Sticky notes, and this is coming from someone who used to love big, widescreen touch interfaces where you could do cool workshops and do all this fun interactive stuff. And I started realizing, you know what? Like some people love that, but some people don't, and most people get sticky notes. And so I find when I'm doing my own consulting work or kind of brainstorming dashboards and what needs to go into it, sticky notes. And there's the everyone understands it. There's no real technical barrier to getting into that, and adoption requires as many people at the table as possible. So if you think of like a non-technical business person, well, if we're jumping into a tool that maybe they're not familiar with, we do risk some degree of disengagement. So I try to minimize the amount of tooling and keep it as low tech as possible. So sticky notes is for the win on that one.
But then at some point you're ready and you have your dashboard fixed and your numbers, and then you need some kind to get your data. Is there then a favorite one, or would you say then it's not my part of work? Go for it and do the technical stuff.
Yeah, it's exactly the latter, Victoria. I don't get into the development anymore because I don't see that's where the value is at.
You see Kai smiling.
And the reason I say that is my skills and expertise don't lend themselves to, being really good at development. Like there are a million better developers out there than me. And there are people that know the tools way better than me. So I'm not in a position to really comment on what one's better than the other. And, I have my own preferences. But if I'm honest with myself, and I think this is the case with many organizations, the tooling preference tends to come down to price and less about features. So, and also the tools I end up working with, I can do whatever it needs to get done in any of the modern BI platforms these days. I don't see a major barrier to adoption with any of the tools, unless we're getting down to, okay, can I customize where the navigation bar is going to go on a dashboard? Yes, there's difference. It's nuance, but I'm not seeing tooling being a significant barrier to adoption, just in terms of just pure technology features. 10 years ago, yes. Now, last kind of 5 years, not really. So I'm also trying to be political, just not to, I don't want to pick a favorite. They all have their pros and cons. And for me, my expertise lies in everything that goes around development, what comes before it, and then what comes after it. And yeah, it's like you said, I tend not to get into the development side. I'll work with the teams to do that. Just what I will do is I'll get them up to the detailed wireframe point, interaction design. And then they've got a really, really good reference for what they need to build. And they'll go build that. And then I'll go help them launch it.
Okay, I think, but that's also what we also work out. It's not about tools. It's really about the methodology or the process or how to get there. And then in case you're working with the modern tools and the larger associations are all working with one of those, I don't know, 5, 6, whatever, how many you count them, business intelligence in the modern space. And there you can get great results. You mentioned, okay, it's the price, and maybe it's also about, I don't know, the tradition or whatever you might call it within the ecosystem of the company. These are the 2 points. But if you have the right methodology, the right path going in this direction, then it's not really a big issue if you're dealing with tool A or B. It's more the methodology. That's also what we support 100%. Yeah, fantastic.
And Kai, I'd add to that as well as I can't remember actually the last time I was involved in a technology selection process. I was in the past, like way like ages ago, but in the last 5 years, I've never been asked to contribute to that, and that might speak to the maturity of these organizations. That okay, look, the decisions probably happening with the CIO, and where I find I have the biggest impact is not always within IT. It tends to be in the business where, especially maturing analytics organizations, where the technology choice has been made, for better or for worse. But it's been a long time since I was involved in picking a certain platform.
Okay, so coming to our last question, it's getting more personal again. So, when we talk about your career, it sounds like really rosy and great and interesting. But I wrote that it wasn't always like that. Would you like to tell our audience a little bit about the dark sides of your career, and maybe what you took off of these situations?
Yeah, like I remember one time doing a workshop, and there's 2 times actually. I've gotten burned a lot in workshops, but there's 2 that really stand out. I won't name the organizations, but they're large organizations, both of them. So in the first one, I was talking about data visualization. It was the C-suite, and the CIO was there. And I was talking with I would say, fairly typical in the industry for us in BI. I was on my data visualization high horse, and felt like I knew, hey, no pie charts, like all that sort of stuff, right? And so one of them was, I was told that right in front of everyone, by this CIO, he said, "Oh, all you're talking about is Stephen Few. Everyone knows that. We are wasting our time." I was like, "Oh my God, this is all I know." It's like one of those times where it's like, I wish I could run out of the room, because it instantly took away everything that I felt like, all the value I was adding. And there's no happy ending to that story. It was just not fun. And if I look back at that, I would say, I was arrogant in what I thought I knew and my perception of what I thought other people knew. It was a CIO. It is very likely that a CIO knows some of this stuff. It's also likely that, there's like very technically competent and they've done some research, especially if they're engaging consultants. So look, there's lessons learned there. Know your audience and know who you're talking to. Don't be arrogant. Another one was kind of similar. And I think this is kind of symptomatic of early in my career. Talking to a CAO, Chief Accounting Officer. And there was a group there, and the CFO was there as well in this workshop. And he, right at the start, it was supposed to be a 4-hour workshop. Right at the start, this gentleman stood up and he said, "This is all BS. I'm out of here." And he got up and left. And I was like, "Oh my God, this is awful. Like, I'm surely going to get fired for this one." And not like 30 seconds later, I can't remember if it was the CAO or the CFO, but the one that was left, she stood up and she said, "Oh, thank God that a-hole is gone. Now we can get some work done." I was like, whoa, what did I walk into? And again, I would chalk that one up to a degree of arrogance in presenting, material to very senior people. I would never do that kind of stuff again. Like, that's 5 years ago where I did that kind of thing, but also then knowing who you're going to be working with, knowing the politics. And if I was a better change management professional, all of that stuff would have been, yeah, of course you need to know that. That's a given. But there are some things like that where I don't want to pick on data scientists, but some of the data scientists that I've worked with that are incredibly smart, far smarter than I am, can have a degree of arrogance when they're working with the business that could surface or could unnecessarily surface tension and friction. That could be a barrier to working together. And so, I think just that those are the kind of the two big learnings I had, Kai, on getting burned. Of course, there's plenty more. This gray hair didn't come from nowhere. Of course, part is just dealing with stress in work and having to try and get people on board. And for a lot of my career, it was the brute force approach. It's like, let's make this work, when there is much more subtler and finer arts to do that and get people on board.
Well, perfect. I mean, looking to the watch, we're already done. I think, this is again for our today's podcast. Thank you again for Viktoria for co-hosting me, and also for you, Nick, for your time and your excellent and hopefully also valuable insights for our guests. I'm pretty sure they will appreciate it. We can continue our tradition, as I mentioned in our pre-talk. The stage at the end is prepared for our guest. The last remaining words, that's for you. We only say, bye-bye. Thank you very much. Please do not thank you for yourself. I mean, the pleasure's on our side. So just say whatever you want. Make promotion to your book, to all the courses you're providing in the near future. We will also put them in the show notes. Thanks again, and great that you were here.
Bye-bye.
Awesome. Well, I will thank you, Viktoria and Kai. It's been a great honor and pleasure. So what I would say is, for everyone listening, please try and apply something different in your career in relation to BI, whether that's you're going to do one interview with an end user. Are you going to try and craft a persona? Are you going to maybe start looking at your dashboards and reports slightly differently? Do yourself a favor. It's going to potentially save you years. It'll probably save you gray hairs, and you'll help your career. So if you take anything out of this, please do that. And I do have a book coming out. Actually, I haven't announced it. This is the first time I'm announcing it publicly. And the book is coming out at the end of December, and it's called Delivering Data Analytics. And you can also check out the website, deliveringdataanalytics.com, if you want to learn more about the courses that I have. And look, I'll leave you with that. Just start applying some of this stuff. You can check out my posts. I give lots of tips all the time, things you can do right away to start making a difference, make your life easier, and accelerate your career. Thank you all.
BI or Die, the podcast by Reporting Impulse about analytics, dashboards, and business intelligence.